Hello, Garland Nixon here. And in case you have been living under a rock, there was a massive drone attack on various and sundry spots and sabotage attacks in Russia. And we're going to talk about the results and what I expect to happen. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the result with what happened the last couple days. Apparently, the Ukrainians the Ukrainians, meaning and I don't even want to say this, in concert with Western intelligence, but let's do it the other way. Western intelligence, under the guise of Ukrainian intelligence, launched a number of attacks in Russia. Apparently, they blew up a bridge or two for when it comes to a civilian. My understanding is, I think there was one civilian train where what they did was they blew up like a bridge just before the train got there. The train hit, I think 7 people dead, 31 injured last I heard. Those numbers could be wrong. They could change. Apparently, another one where there was a freight train of some type, some commercial or government, whatever, but it was a train carrying freight. Apparently something similar happened, bridge blown, something like that. Additionally, my understanding is there was something like 2 airfields hit. What they did was they had some drones in some operation where they had like a big tractor trailer with the big containers on the back, the big trailers type containers that go on ships. And that was rigged up with some drones so that apparently the top of it would open, the drones would fly out, and they would attack whatever the targets were, and they had some level of success. Now, as you can probably tell if you're online, there's a lot of a term I will use, overreaction, right? It is like, oh my God, you're going to get it now. The Russians must attack. They must nuke everybody. And of course, if they don't, Putin's weak. He's weak because he's not reacting. He's not attacking. He's not blowing things up. Ooh, you're going to get it now, guys. Okay, let me give you my perspective. I'll put it like this. From my years of studying Russian culture, interacting with Russians, interacting with Russian culture, observing what the Russians do, closely observing what Sergei Lavrov, President Putin, and others do, how they act, how they react, things of that nature. Here's what I think. A man who does a lot of boating and loves boats, right? Hopefully I'll have my boat, I got an 18-footer. It's that I've, been working on for the last 2 years in one way or another. But I mean, I've been running it, but working on it, it's a 1985 and doing one thing after another. It's been running it, but hopefully I'll have that back together tomorrow, all finished and ready to go again. But the bottom line is, there's a term that we use in boating, and I'm sure you've heard it. It's in vessels: maintain course and speed. That is my expectations based on my study of the Russians. Now, people out here are going to go, oh no, and I've seen this the whole time, right? I remember during the infamous, what was it? The counteroffensive, which I was like, it was actually an offensive, but okay, the West wanted to call it a counteroffensive for public relations purposes, counteroffensive, right? And the Russians simply said, yeah, we don't have a lot of people guarding this town. We're leaving. And they left. And then the Ukrainians moved in, and the Ukrainians said, we took this town. Now, not that the Ukrainians didn't have some success. They seized some, and this is important to discuss the counteroffensive of whatever it was, 22, 23. And what happened? They took some ground, they regained some towns, they took back Liman and what have you. And a lot of it, the Russians left. The Russians abandoned positions that they felt they couldn't properly defend. Boom. And what did they do? Nice and slowly. The Russians were like, well, hey, we need more people. I think we need to go ahead and mobilize. They did a mobilization, which took 6 to 8 months, and it's still going on. So what did they do? The Russians didn't say, we got to throw nukes. We got to go berserk. We got to go crazy. We got to, declare war. Nope. They sat back, they looked at it, and they assessed. We need more soldiers. They did a military technical assessment. We need more soldiers and equipment. We'll hold the lines, we'll fire, we'll shoot, we'll bomb. It's a war. We'll do the things you do in a war. We're not going to panic. We're not going to flip out. Let the people out there online, let the people on Telegram, let the people on Twitter go berserk. And I have friends, and I know lots of people who are like, oh my God, the Russians are going to lose. What's wrong? Putin must be replaced immediately, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, these people are pretty patient if you look at them. So again, they ain't the West. You're in the West. It's a different culture. Understand something. When you think about Iran, when you think about Russia's been around 1,000 years, Iran's been around a couple thousand years, China's been around 5,000 years. These people ain't on the same timeline as us. They don't react like we do. In the West, what we're taught is do this, boom, you got to react. They do that, boom, you got to react. Something that I tried to teach my daughter, that I try to teach young people. And I think the Russians practice this. This is something I try to practice, right? Okay. And this is the way I understand, say, the Russians' strategic perspective. Think about this. There's two words, stimulus, response, right? What do animals and little children do? Stimulus, response. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. Ouch. I'm punching you. When an animal, something happens, it immediately reacts. Children, something happens, they react. There are a lot of people that are dead or in jail right now because they did that. Somebody said or did something. I'll fix you. And they punch the person. The person falls, hits their head on the curb. The person dies. Now they're in jail. And they're like, oh my God, I should have thought about before I acted, right? So here's my point. Stimulus, response. Here's your stimulus. Here's your response. And you'll notice the crooked finger from being broken. That's good, crooked for life. Stimulus, response, stimulus, response, stimulus, response. You have nothing in between stimulus, response. You're like an animal or a little teeny child. Stimulus, contemplation, consideration, thoughts, planning, strategizing, right? And now response is over here. Right? Between stimulus and a response, there's wisdom in there, right? There's consideration. The person that something happens, boom, I'm going to hit him back. They're reactive and they get themselves in a lot of trouble, right? In self-defense, what happens? Somebody does something that you don't like. You jerk, you idiot. And a person who's trained may say, well, I can probably take them. They're not trained. And they're pissed already. You jerk. Oh, yeah. You're a bigger jerk. And then they go back and forth. The person punches them, they punch the person, whatever, and they end up in jail, in trouble. Somebody comes back with a knife and stabs them. Terrible things happen, right? Somebody says, you're a jerk. And here's a person over here that's well-trained, that could easily defend themselves and maybe easily defeat the person. But they're like, yeah, but that ain't going to end up good. Who knows what could happen? You're a jerk. And a person's like, and they get ready to call him a jerk. And they think, you know what? I'm trained to use wisdom. Hey, look, man, I don't want any trouble. They pick up their gym bag. They leave the gym. They're playing volleyball, whatever. So I'll kick your ass, you idiot. And they look at him and they really want to let him. And they want, oh yeah, well, I'll poke you in the eyes. I'll give you all 5 elbow strikes on you, one after the other, right? Oh, you're going to get it now, right? But they stop. The stimulus is a verbal attack. But between stimulus and response, there's wisdom and consideration. So it's not stimulus, response. It's stimulus, stop, consider, strategize, and then you have chosen your response. Your response didn't choose you, right? This has happened. You thought about it. It could be a family member. Somebody said something to you and you're angry, and just that quick, you say something so quick that you can't take it back. And then the person's like, oh, you hurt me. And a person just like their girlfriend left them because they said something mean to her. And they're like, oh, but I really love her. I don't want to leave. I don't want her to leave me. Please come back. Sorry, pal. You said X and you can't take that back because you didn't stop to think. Yeah, you were mad, but you really loved her. You didn't want to leave her. And you said something mean to her and it hurt her and she's gone. What a terrible thing. Imagine if this had happened and made you mad and you're like, And you're like, oh boy, I don't want to lose her. Okay, we'll talk later. And you walked away and you came back once you were cooled down and you chose your response. Your response didn't choose you. There's wisdom between the stimulus and the response. And the closer the stimulus gets to the response, the less wisdom until there's none. It's just a reaction, right? The Russian leadership. I'm not saying every Russian. I'm sure there's plenty of Russians. You name it. No, yeah, like I said, a lot of Russian people. I know some that can, just like everybody else. There's all different kinds of people. I'm talking about the Russian leadership. I'm talking about the Chinese or the Iranian leadership. I'm talking about countries that have been around for thousands of years, or at least 1,000 years, and they have a different timeline. And their timeline always is going to include something happened. Stimulus response. Because if you're thinking, I'm going to do this now, they're thinking, well, if I do this, how that's going to affect me 6 months from now? How's it going to affect me 6 years from now? How's it going to affect me 60 years from now? How's it going to affect me 100 years from now? They got a different timeline. So they don't have to, the Ukrainians did that. I'll fix them. I'll throw a Reshniks at them. Oh, Germany, you're going to get it. I'm going to bomb the MI6 headquarters. And they overreact. But here's the other side. If you have a successful plan and you are working that successful plan and that plan is working, why would you change it? You see, one of the things that happens is when a person is losing, when they don't have any other options, they try to get you to do something different, right? You're boxing and you go here and you're here and you duck. And every time you duck over, your left is too quick. Pop, and you pop them with the left. You move around, and every time you get them swaying a little bit this way, pop them to the left. And they can't stop that left jab, no matter what. Pop, pop, pop. You keep throwing the damn left jab. But what do they want to do? They want to try to do something, hug you, anything they can to try to get you to stop you from throwing that left jab, because they got no defense for the left jab. It's too quick for them. And you get them off balance and you pop them with the left jab. You keep hitting them with the left jab. It's working. Why would you stop? Why would you? Oh, well, this guy just stepped on my foot. I'll fix him. I'm going to throw a haymaker at him. My big right. You're going to go crazy, right? Instead of being cool and crisp and pop, throw, pop, pop, pop. Nope. You're going to go mad. You're going to get angry and you're going to overreact. And then he's going to beat you because you didn't use your noggin. You didn't consider that guy's trying to get me to stop me from throwing my left jab because he can't stop it. I ain't changing that. Okay, here's my point. Did the Russians overreact to anything yet? Remember the ATACMS? They're like, hey, you fire ATACMS at us, we're going to have a problem. And the Americans started firing ATACMS at them. And the Russians, I think there was some plan. But if you recall what happened next, Trump had already won and Trump was coming into office. And it appears to me that in desperation, the Biden people, et cetera, were trying to get the Russians to overreact so they could do something crazy before Trump came in. And that would stop Trump from even trying to do anything, right? No, I can't say he did anything right. But they were trying to throw a spanner in the works, as they would say in Brits, right? So what happened? The Russians said, you better not do that. Boom. Biden and crew threw ATACMS at him. And Trump came out and made a statement. He says, that's mad. That's crazy. They shouldn't do that. I would never do that. If it was me, I wouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that. That's crazy. That could start World War III. And the Russians, though they had said they were going to react and respond, what did they do? They didn't say, well, we said we were going to respond. So even though Trump's going to be president next and he's just marking time and we know this is a deliberate provocation to try to overreact, we said we were going to, so we have to. No. They said, this was our plan. Now, Trump came out and said, hey, if it was me, I wouldn't do it. I'll be president in a couple of months and there won't be no ATACMS, right? Not me. I'm not going to give the green light for that. And the Russian says, okay, let's meet. This is my assumption. But at some point, they made a decision not to respond in the same way that they said they were going to respond. And a lot of people got mad. Oh, doggone it. The Russians, they said they were going to react and they didn't react. They're not reactionary people. Think about this. Who wins? The person that everybody else is following. You're leading and everybody else is following. Why? And even the loser even knows that, because they know this. They're reacting to you. If they can do things and get you to react to them, they win, right? If I have a particular fighting style and you force me to fight your style, right? There's two boxers and one of them has one style and one of them has the other. The one that can force the other person to fight his style, to fight his method, is the one that wins. Right? So I think the Russians have a style and a method, and it is a war of attrition, and they're good at it. And they beat Napoleon with a war of attrition, and they beat the Germans with a war of attrition. A war of attrition works for them, and they win in the long run. In the short term, you're going to take some punches in the teeth. You're going to take some hits. You're going to get some black eyes. You're going to get some bloody nose. But in bloody noses, I guess you can't get bloody noses because technically you only have one nose. But you get my point, right? You're going to get a bloody nose. Is it going to happen? Yeah. Are you going to get embarrassed at time where your enemy gets a punch in? It's going to happen. Where they get in something you would, yeah, fair enough. Now, this was a provocation because the Russians and everybody else knows that this was Western intelligence. Now, here's what else you can figure out really quickly. So what do we hear? They've been planning this for 6 months to a year. What does that mean? That means that this was from under the Biden administration, that the planning for this, that everything, that this was CIA, MI6, whoever, that under the Biden administration, they started planning this. This is a remnant of the Biden administration. I'm not taking anything from the Trump administration. I'm not saying Trump's good guy, bad guy, anything like that. This has nothing to do with this. I'm saying just from the perspective of what we were told about the period of timing that it took and all of that this happened. Could have been a year or more. So this was a Biden administration move. And from Trump's perspective, I guess, just from a strategic political perspective, he can make that argument to get himself out from under it, whatever. We've had different reports. One report says that Hegseth was updated about it, and that was put out this morning. And I'm like, that's definitely the system trying to tie the Trump administration to this, which they may or may not be tied to it. But clearly the fact that that was put out on the morning of the Istanbul talks means it was put out because it was the morning of the Istanbul talks. Okay, it was another attempt to throw a monkey wrench in the Istanbul talks, which we all put. Look, people are like, "Why? There goes the peace process." It ain't a peace process. The Russians know who they're dealing with. They know what they're dealing with. The Russians are not doing a peace process. Now, they're going to do everything to appear genuine, and they will actually be genuine in a way. If I know that you ain't going to do whatever it is I need done, that don't mean that I can't genuinely say, this is what I need done, man. I've done everything I can here. Here's what I want. And then the Ukrainians are saying, we're going to give you our demands. The Russians already know they ain't taking their demands. Nobody's fooled here. The Russians know what time it is, but it benefits the Russians for any number of reasons to continue with this process. Number one, it's from a public relations perspective. I think it's been great for the Russians. I think it's been outstanding for the Russians from a public perspective. Public relations perspective, right? Because they get to say to their allies, India, Bristol, look at us, we're doing everything we can, even though they know what the deal is, right? Yeah, we know what time it is. Well, you know, we're doing everything we can. We understand. We hope they'll change. You know, and I know they won't, but we're going to let them know. Meanwhile, we're going to continue fighting the war. And of course, just like if you sue somebody and you go to court, what's the judge going to say? Have you done everything in your power? Have you exhausted all attempts to resolve this before coming to court? And a case could be set aside without prejudice. Of course, you can bring it back, but there are judges that'll say, and certainly sometimes the defendant will file for motion for dismissal and say this person hasn't done everything they can to resolve it before going to court. While if they just came and talked to us, or there's public officials who, you know, and there's some courts that have various sections that are based. That's all they do. If you're going to sue somebody in small claims court, you go there and you have to go, like in a county I live in, you have to go to the court first. And if you're going to sue somebody in small claims court, you literally have to go to these people and sit down and try to work out a deal. And if you can't get a deal sitting with these people who try to mitigate the circumstances, then you're allowed to go to small claims court, but you can't before that, right? You've got to try first. So my point being, Putin's a lawyer. The Russians are very bureaucratic in nature. And I think part of it is the Russians want to be able to make the argument to their allies that they have exhausted all attempts, all means and manner and all that stuff to resolve it. And they just ended up having to whoop ass and take names, right? Which is what they're doing anyway. But Putin's a lawyer. Remember, that's how lawyers think. I want to set the groundwork for what my argument's going to be after the victory. Well, you just came and beat them up. Look at everything we did. Didn't we go to Istanbul over and over? No matter, they attacked, they did everything they could to try to sidetrack us. They did terrorist attacks. They did, you name it, they did it. Right. So therefore, we did everything we could to try to resolve it peaceably. They didn't want to resolve it peaceably. Hey, we had to open a can of whip ass, right? That's what the Russians makes sense. And let's be honest about this. They attacked 2 airfields, right? You can say that the airfields are strategic, whatever the case may be, but they are airfields, which means that really under international law and a military engagement, airfields are a legitimate target. You may say, well, they went after strategic bombers or what have you, but it was a military target. There was nothing illegal. There was nothing illegal under international law about the Ukrainians attacking a military target. Now, there were 2, one may even argue that an attack on the train, a freight train, they can argue, we could push that around, but they could argue, well, they either were carrying or could potentially be carrying things that would help the military effort, so we attacked a freight train. That argument can be made, maybe successfully, but they can't make that argument about a passenger train. So of all of those things, if we break them down, quite honestly, the attacks on the airfield were in a military conflict, legal under international law. The attack on a passenger train, you can make an argument that it was legal under international law if they argue that it was or could have been carrying things that could be used for the militarily for the war effort. Okay, but you can't make an argument for deliberately attacking a passenger train, so therefore that is a terrorist incident. So if I am the Russian leadership, I look at that and I say, this was a terrorist incident right here. The other 2 things I ain't happy about, but it's a war. They can do these other 3 things. This one they can't. But keep in mind something. Let's go back in history. How about the Crocus City Hall attack? Clearly that was Ukrainians. It was unthinkable. They attacked in Moscow, and it was horrible, and they killed a lot of people. It was a terrible, terrible thing. Did the Russians overreact? Did the Russians alter their strategy? No, they did not. See, my understanding of the way it works is this. President Putin says to the military people, I have a military task that needs to be accomplished, right? And his military leaders, yes, sir. And they give him a proposal or proposals. Here's our options. We can do this, everything from just obliterating everything with nuclear weapons to, hitting our opponents in the head with a turkey feather, right? Here's the full continuum of options. And, maybe what do you recommend? Well, as our military staff, the general staff, we say we should choose this one, and then it's up to President Putin. But the likelihood from what I've seen is that President Putin will give them the authority, give them the power, give them the task. Here's your military task. You do it. I don't think Putin's the kind of guy to step in and say, we've changed the military strategy, especially when it's working. It's working. Look, think about it. You got a soccer match going on, and the coach has a particular strategy, and he's up 3-1. There's 5 minutes left. And one of the players on the other team bites one of your players. And the players are like, we got to get revenge. We want to just come out and run over them and kick them in the groin and stuff like that. And the coach says, they're trying to provoke us. They want us to do something. They want us to get penalties. Let's don't do this. Let's finish this game and win. I want everybody to keep doing the things you've been doing. We're going to win this game. We'll deal with it after the game's over, but we need to get this victory, right? Are you not going to change? Yeah. Biting one of your players, probably not a good idea. I'm saying somebody should probably get, ejected or whatever. But whether they do or not, you're winning the game. Maintain course and speed. And if the Russians didn't go nuke them over the Crocus City Hall attack, which if you're going to nuke somebody, Crocus City Hall is probably a good reason to nuke them. If you ain't going to nuke them for that, they ain't going to nuke anybody for this. They're not nuking anybody. Why? They're not, for this reason. They're going to win. That's why the Russians win wars. That's why they win, because they know how to fight and they will not be distracted, right? If you're losing, you have to do something. If you're at a disadvantage, you have to throw, as they say in football, a Hail Mary pass. Man, this ain't working. What do we do? Anything. I don't know. Let's try to piss the Russians off. because they're kicking our ass. Okay, it doesn't matter. We got nothing to lose. We'll try to blow up a passenger train or something. Then they'll get pissed and they'll do something. Maybe they'll shoot an Orexnik at us, and then maybe they'll nuke or something. Maybe they'll attack Germany, and then we can drag all of NATO in it. That's our only chance. We got to provoke the Russians into doing something really stupid, over the top. And then when they do that, then we can maybe get some help some kind of way. They ain't gonna work with the Russians. That's why they always win, because they're about business, and their business is killing Ukrainians, and business is good. One at a time. You will turn on Telegram, and what do you see? Here's a group of Ukrainian soldiers, and here's some artillery pieces. Boom, boom, boom. No more Ukrainian soldiers, right? That's what you're going to see. Turn it on every single day. Here's a HIMARS, SMIMARS, FLYMARS. Boom, it's gone. Every single day you're going to see that. You ain't going to see something different. This is what the Russians do. They chip away day after day after day. They are focused on their mission. They are focused on their task, and you can come in and hit them and knock them a little off their task. You know what they're going to do? Whoop. Back on task, and they're going to start chipping away, and you can hit them that way. Boom, Crocus City Hall. Oh, we'll get ourselves together. Okay, what are you going to do about the Crocus City attack? Whoop, back on task. Throw in some artillery. Bring me some FPV drones. Let's go. Continue to pressure the line. That's what they're going. You know what they're going to do tomorrow? Same thing they did yesterday, and the same thing they did the day before that. You know who's wishing they do something different? The Ukrainians on the front lines. Have you looked at the front lines lately? The Russians are leaning heavy. You look at there's red getting more and more. The Ukrainians are backing up more and more against the wall. And you know what the Russians are going to do? They're going to lean on those lines till they crumble. And at some point, I'm telling you, those lines are going to start to crumble. And when those lines crumble, there's flat open areas. And when they crumble, what's going to happen? The Ukrainians are going to have to come out of their fortified positions and run to the river. And this, I've said all along, this is what I believe. You've got the fortified positions all along the contact line. And when they crumble, what are they going to do? The Ukrainians are going to have to run for the river to cross the bridges. And here's my guess. When those lines crumble and they run for the river and they get to the bridges, there ain't going to be no bridges. Everybody's saying, why is it that the Russians won't blow the bridges? They don't need to blow them. There's no point blowing. Let them leave them there, because that is the cheese in the trap. You're going to know the bridges are there. And at some point, when the Ukrainians are dislodged from their trenches and dug in positions, and they know, what do we do now? Let's head for the river. We'll cross the bridges. And once we cross the bridges, we'll be in Western Ukraine and we'll regroup over there. They're half right. They'll run for the river, but they ain't crossing the bridges, because when the Russians will let them get up, the bridges are still there. Head for the bridges. They'll be running. The Russians are behind them. Okay, we're moving. We're heading for the bridges. Of course, they're out in the open now. Artillery's on, blah, blah, blah. They're going to get there. And just before they get to the river, boom, 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 boom. All the bridges are gone. And now you've run up to the banks of the Dnieper River. There ain't no bridges to cross. And there ain't nothing behind you but Russians throwing artillery. And they're going to annihilate. That's my guess. They're going to dislodge them just like they do now. Day by day, artillery, shell by artillery, chip by chip, chunk by chunk, until they go. Ask the Germans how that worked out. The Russians took 1,840 some towns and cities and villages on the way to Berlin. And guess what happened? At some point, they got to Berlin. And that was that. The destruction of an army group center. You might want to look at that, on and on and on. Big, gigantic battles. And the Russians just kept coming. And you had the starvation of Russian peoples, rape and murder of all kinds of mayhem when it comes to the things that the Ukrainians did to Russian civilians. And the Russians were pissed, but they just kept doing what they do, because that's the way they win a war. They do the same thing. Get up tomorrow. What are you going to do tomorrow? Same thing we did today. We're going to get on the line and we're going to put the pressure on them and keep going. And in order to be successful, you have to do the same thing over and over. It is a war of attrition. And the Russians are not going to do big things. Now, don't get me wrong. I ain't saying they may not respond. They may throw an Oreshnik at somebody. They may hit some. You know what the Russians tend to do? They'll hit a couple gatherings of troops or something that they were going to hit anyway, right? They'll be like, there's a gathering of Ukrainian troops in a training bunker, whatever, right? In comes a big old, a Kinjal missile, kablooey, blows them all up. 60 Ukrainian soldiers were killed, and the Russians will say, see, we told you we're going to retaliate. We hit 4 different locations of Ukrainian troops that they were going to hit anyway. Let's face it, if they had the location of them, you think they wouldn't have hit them if this thing hadn't happened? They're going to do that. And then, you got to pacify your people. People want blood. Russian people want blood. Their supporters want blood. They're angry. They got to give them blood in this war. So they're going to say, we hit here, 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 and here. There we go. We got our revenge. Just like after Crocus City Hall. Just like the other day when the Russians threw 500 missiles in 1 or 2 days at the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians said, hey! And the Russians said that was a retaliation, because they threw drones and missiles at us first. Well, here's the thing. The Russians had those drones and missiles set, and they were going to hit them. But it was convenient to say it was a retaliation. It didn't really matter. It's a war. The truth is, it's a war. Everything's a retaliation. Not really. Everything is this. They got a plan, and they're working their plan. So now, as I said from the very beginning, what the Russians aren't going to do. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, boom. And the Russians are going to stop. And between stimulus and response is wisdom. The Russians are going to think, how can we play this from a public relations perspective? How can we play this from a negotiations perspective? Put your teams together. This is what happened. This is what happened. Is there any way, Putin, Lavrov, get your people together, and how can we play this? Come back with how we can use this regarding public relations, regarding diplomacy. We're going to talk to some of our people. And look, just think about this. This is a game that I might play. Let's say I got Brazil and India, right? And I'm like, oh, we're really pissed now. Brazil and India is like, don't overreact. Please don't use nukes. Don't go crazy. Well, I'm ready to. I don't know. I might have to nuke everybody. No, don't. Please, we're your allies. Please do not use nukes. This thing's going to go up in smoke. And I say, well, Lula and, Smula, Hula, Bula, whoever, all these other guys from all these other allies, I call them all together and say, allies, I'm really pissed. I'm furious. My people, they're calling for blood. And I was just going to start throwing nukes everywhere. I just was going to lose it. We got Oreshniks are in the pipe, man. We were just firing them in Berlin, Göppingen, France, Nice, you name it. We had Oreshniks coming. But you know what? You guys are good allies. You talked me out of it. You guys got a lot of pull. And so, because it means that much to you, because you really don't want to see that happen, I'll pull the reins back. I'll call my dogs and I'll say, dogs, don't bite. Don't bite. I know you want to, and I know I told you could bite, but Lula, Hula, Shmula, the rest of them, Modi, whatever, Xi Jinping, all of them came to me and asked me not to do it. And I said, hey, you guys are my friends. You're my boys. You're my crew. All good. I won't do it. I wasn't going to do it already. But I get some status with my crew, with my allies. And they go back and they say, yeah, we talked to Putin. He was getting ready to kick some ass, but we're tight with him. He listened to us. I wasn't going to do it anyway. So here's my point. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm being facetious and having a little fun with it. But my point being, it comes back to this. The way the Russians think, it is, how can we use this to our advantage? We ain't going to change the way we fight. We've been beating the West ass this way since the 1700s, since King Charles of Sweden, for God's sake. Ask Napoleon. Did we change? Ask Hitler. Did we change? We've been kicking these people's asses like this for hundreds of years. We know how to do it. It ain't hard. It works every single time. We ain't doing nothing different this time. We got a formula that works. And they're just going to work their formula. I know. You're angry. You're emotional. I'm not angry and emotional because it's my nature. I'm kind of zombie-like. I can be a bit of an automaton. I think I'm a Black Russian, shall we say. But my point being is, you look at RT, right? You look at TASS. You want to see what's coming out of Kremlin. You look at RT, you look at TASS, you look at Sputnik. And then you look around. And what do you see? Do you see, woo, they're going to get it now. Oh, we're pissed. No, look on RT. What do you see? Arte, details of Russian peace proposal revealed. Russia-Ukraine talks wrap up, live updates. Russia demands Ukraine stop false child kidnapping. Moscow and Kiev agree to largest ever prisoner swap. If you look at the Russians right now, if you look at their state media, you might say, state sponsored media, whatever you want to call it, not even really mentioned. Barely even mentioned. Let me go to TASS. That tells you something. That's a way to read them. TASS. New swaps, exchanging memorandums. Russia, Ukraine talks in Istanbul. Russia embassy firmly rejects London's fabricated absurd accusations of attacks. TASS photo exhibition dedicated to late Pope Francis opens in Moscow. Does that sound like a people that are ready to nuke somebody? They didn't even have it on the front page. I mean, you got to go down. I'm going down the front page. Istanbul, IOC, Iran set to reject U.S. nuclear deal. Macron's statue stolen from Wax Museum in Paris. Literally, they got an article that says Macron's statue was stolen from a wax museum in Paris on TASS. But nothing about the drone strikes and all. What does that tell me? They see that as the cost of doing war. We're in a war. They're probably going to attack our airfields if they get a chance. They're Nazis. They're probably going to attack some civilians like they've done over and over and over again. Remember when they fired some missiles that had a bunch of little bomblets on a beach in Crimea and wounded and killed a bunch of people that were out on the beach bathing one day, just hanging out on the beach? And everybody's like, oh boy, the Russians are going to nuke them now. No, they didn't. The Russians ain't going to nuke them now. You know what they're going to do? They're going to win the war. They're going to win the war the way they know how to win the war. And you know what? They're going to win the war the way they know how to win the war, because they don't want to fight it again 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. They want to clean this mess up once and for all. And they got a plan, and they're going to work their plan. That's all it is they're going to do. They're going to maintain course and speed. I've been running a boat in a fog, right? And you're running in the fog and you set a course and you're going from point A to point B and you're looking around. I can't see a damn thing. And you're looking for ships. Oh my God, is the ship going to come? And blah, blah, blah. And what do? I don't know. Doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere. What do? Maintain course and speed. We plotted a course from this point to this compass point. And we should see buoy number 12A coming up. 1 Alpha Hotel, right? 1AH, right? No, that's the one in the bay. So we're plotted a course to 1 Alpha Hotel, right? Okay, what are we going to do? Well, according to my dead reckoning skills, if we travel at 12 knots, it should take us 29 minutes to get there. So we should start seeing it in another 8 minutes, right? Yeah, but should I turn? Should I do this? Keep this damn thing on that compass heading. Maintain course and speed. Be patient. And then after a few minutes, you're like, what is that up ahead? I think that's a marker. Is it green or red? What do you know? It's 1 Alpha Hotel, because you were patient and you plotted a course, boom, and you maintain course and speed. Somebody put this: Russia knows war. Exactly. You ain't going to tell Russians how to fight a war, but they always seem to win, don't they? You could argue they should do different things, but when's the last time you won a war? I could argue they should do different things, but you know what? During World War II, 83% of all Nazis that died at the hands of the Russians, because they know how to fight a war. And the Ukrainians, I wouldn't want to be them, because this thing's going to keep going down and they're going to keep rejecting things. And one of these days, they're going to be in a position where they ain't going to be able to reject nothing. See, I think the Russians they're going to obliterate their army. They're going to obliterate it. They're going to annihilate it. They're going to say it ain't nothing left. When they back those guys up against the river, they ain't taking prisoners. They're wiping them all out. There's going to be nothing to reconstitute. They're going to destroy their equipment, their headquarters. They're going to destroy. There's going to be nothing left to fight with. They're going to destroy the NATO, put together a proxy army, and the Russians will destroy that proxy army. And the Russians won't have, the NATO won't have a real one. Somebody put Japan beat Russia at sea over 100 years ago. You may beat them at sea. Russia's a land army. Good luck on the ground. You know what I'm saying? It's like some people that fight martial arts, like grappling. Man, grapplers, they get you and they get you on the ground. You are in deep and serious trouble. They're going to start snapping bones, breaking, yanking, hyperextending, grappling. A person who is a good ground fighter, man, is not you don't want to get in a fight with that guy. or girl if they're a good ground fighter. So my point is, you may give the Russians a fit at sea. Well, now to actually tell you the truth, now that they got these hypersonic missiles, it ain't going to be real easy. Here's my point, though. They're ground fighters, and they're going to continue to fight their style. They've got their style going on. That's the law. They ain't going to change. All I'm saying is this. They're not going to overreact. They're not going to change. They're going to do the things that they do, and they're going to be successful. Let me see. Did I miss anything? I'm just checking. Nope. Okay, I think we're good. Do I see any? It's if I see anyone who has done a new, I don't see anyone who has done a super chat, so that's fine. Oh, that's it. Somebody said the Soviets shattered the Japanese military in Manchuria towards the end of World War II. That's right. I mean, look, bottom line is this. They're ground fighting people. So right now, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. And this is not even a blip on their radar. As I said, okay, somebody attacked their airfields. They expect their airfields. Let's say, my understanding is they lost somewhere around 3.5 to 4 planes. So let's get double that. They lost eight strategic. I think they got 50 to 70 strategic bombers. And they lost 8. And bottom line, what do? They like carry nukes or something. So what? Guess what? They ain't going to need them if it's a nuclear war. They're going to fire Sarmats anyway. So it is what it is. Sparky says, "Make Ukraine Russia again." Thanks a lot, there, Spark. Well, that's it. I guess that's it. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Do me a favor, if you can afford it, as I said, whether it's Cash App or buy me a coffee or Patreon, if you can afford it. Hit me off with a little something for the channel. If you can't, that's fine. Just share this on all your social media platforms and follow me on Substack and Rockfin and Rumble and all that kind of stuff. And of course, guess what I got now? See, everything's going across the bottom is I have a PO box, and you'll see that list. And feel free, you can send a letter, you can send a donation, you can send a book or magazine, whatever you want. All right, let's see. Somebody else. What do we got here? Feral agent. I just had. Oh, okay. Sparkster. Sparkster says, "Don't leave a rump state called Ukraine, lest it remain a NATO playground, a carpetbaggers, money laundry, and BlackRock property." Yeah, I think Sparkster, I think you hit the nail on the head. I really do. Thank you very much, Anthony Peterson. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I think, Sparky, you hit the nail on the head, and that is they understand that NATO has come to their border, that NATO wants to use Ukraine as a weapon against him, and they're going to break that weapon. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.